Hineni, here I am. Hineni, here we all are. Thanks to everybody for showing up tonight. My name is Jane Grossman, and I'm the Vice Chair of Northern Nevada Marches Forward. Our organization is an inclusive organization with a mission to support, spotlight, and uplift the voices and power of diverse people and communities to create transformative social change. On the second Tuesday of each month, we will sponsor forums with local leaders on critical topics facing our community. Tonight, we're addressing anti-Semitism. In the coming months, we'll address violence against women, climate change, systemic racism, LGBTQIA2S+ rights, and more. Our main focus up until this year has been to sponsor the Reno Women's March. We've also sponsored speed networking events to get to know our amazing nonprofits in Northern Nevada. Tonight is the kickoff of our Education in Action series. I turned 60 this year, and I never discuss anti-Semitism in a forum like this. I've worked on dozens of political and social justice campaigns since college. Tonight is the first time I'm speaking out publicly about anti-Semitism. You can't fix a problem until you understand it, and that's what we hope to help do with our monthly forums. We know some of the images in the slideshow were disturbing. Sadly, those type of anti-Semitic pieces are showing up in more places and more frequently. I can no longer remain silent. I've experienced anti-Semitism throughout my entire life. Like others on this panel, I lost many relatives in the Holocaust. In high school, on the heels of a class on the Holocaust, I was at a slumber party with several friends. We were baking cookies, and a friend said with a laugh, "After we take the next batch out, let's put Jane in the oven and see what happens." People were horrified and chastised my friend, but the damage was done. The memory still lingers 40 years later. More recently, I was organizing a community event here in Reno, and a committee member scheduled the event on Yom Kippur, the holiest and most important holiday for most Jews. When I asked her if we could find a different day, she said, "Well, I'm not Jewish, and most of the people who are attending aren't Jewish, so does it really matter?" I asked her, "Would you schedule this event on Christmas?" She got it, and we found another date. The Jewish people have faced thousands of years of persecution. Many converted away from Judaism because they were faced with the choice, convert or be killed. Others converted because, well, it's challenging to be a Jew. Some people from other faiths have chosen to convert to Judaism. So we have a very comprehensive program for you tonight. Some logistics, please keep yourself on mute and put your questions in the chat. If you want to ask a question of a specific person, you can say so. We will not tolerate disparaging comments or speaking out of turn. I'm going to have each speaker introduce themselves tonight. We're joined by so many wonderful community members. I also want to thank other community members who are not speaking: Barbara Weinberg, Gail Small, Jen Wolf, and Mara Langer. They all helped with the planning. Thanks to Wes McKillen, who's doing a great job running our Zoom. Special thanks to Jackie Shelton, the chair of Northern Nevada Marches Forward. Jackie's a steadfast ally who saw the need for a forum such as this and worked tirelessly to make it happen. To start us off, Rabbi Katz will share some of the joys and wonders of belonging to this ancient people. So Rabbi Katz, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Actually, what Jane told me to do was Judaism 101. For a tradition and a religion that's been in existence for maybe 4,000 years, it's a little difficult to put that into 5 minutes, but I'll try. The first Jew that we know of is Abraham, not the first person who ever heard God. Remember, Adam heard God saying, "Don't eat that fruit of that tree." And Noah certainly heard God say, "I'm tired of the earth being corrupt. I'm going to wipe everybody out and I'm going to start over with you." But Abraham, the story of Abraham, the first Jew, is informative because what did God tell Abraham? Leave everything you know, get out of your father's house, go away from where you live, and just go to this land that I will show you. No directions, just go. And that's probably Jewish faith in a nutshell there. Judaism used to be a family religion. It was just the descendants of Abraham and Sarah. And then after that, the descendants of Isaac and Rebekah. And then finally, the descendants of Jacob, who married Leah and Rachel, and Bilhah and Zilpah, their serving maids. And that's where the 12 tribes of Israel come from. So how did we become Israel? When we were still Abraham's people, we were Ivrim, we were the Hebrews, those who crossed over the Euphrates River. Later on, we became Israelites. Jacob became Israel when he wrestled with the angel and wrestled really with God, and we've been wrestling with God ever since. So we're God wrestlers, we strive with God. We're not a religion that just accepts things on faith, especially at the time of the rabbis, when we become people who are trying to figure out what God wants of us. We no longer have a temple after the year 70 CE, and therefore the people who explain things to us are sages, later called Pharisees, and then even after that called rabbis, had to figure out how to make Judaism portable, because there was no more temple, and therefore anything that we did to express our happiness, our joy, or to atone for our sins had to become something we could do anywhere. We no longer had that place. And so Jews became the faces of many different kinds of people in many different countries. We always think mostly about Ashkenazic Jews from Eastern Europe, or Sephardic Jews from Greece and Spain, and then Middle Eastern Jews who were certainly all over the Middle East from the first time that we were exiled from our temple. But where does that leave us now? We have a Bible which is shared to a degree by Christianity. Christians call our Bible the Old Testament. We don't think anything, we don't have a New Testament. So for us, it's just the Hebrew Bible. It stops, and in fact, it was put together by rabbis in the 2nd century, and they said, that's it, we're not adding anything else to it. And then the rabbis began discussing what it meant. And that's what rabbis do now, and that's what Jews do now. We argue about what God wants us to do, and what's the best way to do it. There's a famous story back from before there were rabbis and there were just sages, and there was the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. And somebody who had a pagan religion and was interested in becoming part of the Jewish people went to Shammai and said, teach me everything there is to know about Judaism while I stand on one foot. And Shammai wouldn't have any of that. So he took his building square and he hit the guy and said, get out of here. So the person who wanted to convert went to Hillel, and he said to Hillel, tell me everything there is to know about Judaism while I stand on one foot. And Hillel's answer was, whatever's hateful to you, don't do to another person. All the rest of it is commentary. Now go and learn. And that's what we're still doing. We're still learning. So that's Judaism 101 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Katz. And if you want to learn more, Rabbi Katz is doing a 10-part series, I believe, right, through Temple Emanu-El. So if you go to, we'll put a link in there. If you go to Temple Emanu-El's website, you can see more. So now we're going to hear from Rabbi Benjamin Zober from Temple Sinai to talk a little bit about the history of anti-Semitism and some definitions.
So the definition of anti-Semitism, and there's all sorts of different ways to look at this, but at its kind of core, anti-Semitism is hostility, prejudice, hatred, or violence against Jews as Jews. And that hatred is centered around a belief that Jews are a corrupting or evil presence in society. Some of these ideas have been used over and over and over again and date back centuries. But anti-Semitism really kind of, I don't want to say came into his own, but gets going in large part in the Middle Ages, when the Catholic Church starts to spread the idea falsely that Jews killed Jesus. And from there, Jews get blamed for all sorts of problems, for when sickness would arise or when the economy would tank, it was the Jews who were seen as the scapegoats. And they would accuse Jews of being vermin or disease or causing the plague. One of the ideas that emerged is this thing that is known as a blood libel, this false belief that Jews would kidnap Christian children and use their blood to make matzah. And when these things would appear, there would be more persecution, there would be massacres, there would be expulsion, and the Jews of that community or that kingdom would have to go somewhere else and try to find somewhere where they could be welcome. And so we find ourselves going from place to place, and coming into a new place, we're seen as different and viewed with suspicion. And oftentimes the only things that we are brought in for are things that nobody else wants to do, like lending money or collecting taxes. And when you are the group of people that is known as the tax collectors and the landlords, it doesn't really endear you to your neighbors. And at the same time, this idea of Jews as greedy starts to take shape. And it's one of these ideas that has stuck around even to the modern day. We saw in the slideshow, there was the image from the 2016 presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton in front of a pile of money and a Jewish star saying, "the most corrupt candidate in history." That image, it originated on a neo-Nazi website. They were using that old idea and just in a new way. The other one, there was on a Shutterstock, a stock footage website, there was an image, I'm not sure what it was supposed to be for, but it was of a guy wearing a kippah, hunched over, smiling with a pile of money. So these ideas, which are old, continue to get used and to continue to be part of the conversation. And along with that, as we go all these places, it seems like we have more presence than we do. And so when we hear things like global power, the Rothschilds, George Soros, they're all euphemisms for an idea of Jewish control. And much of that stems from something that in the 19th century was called the Protocols of Elders of Zion. It was a fake document, and it was supposed to be this manifesto of how Jews would control the world. And it went all over the place, and it's something that, even though it is completely false, it still shows up. QAnon, the conspiracy theory, when you look at it or watch it, lots of the ideas in there are straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, just repackaged for the 21st century. And the idea that this tiny minority, and we are a very, very tiny minority, could wield so much power is almost absurd, but it persists. And one of the things that we see in the heart of modern anti-Semitism and white supremacy and white nationalism is this idea that Jews are exerting influence. Because if whites are superior, if they are a master race, or they are better, and they are not succeeding, either because they're living in poverty or these inferior people are indeed succeeding, something has to be upsetting the order. And what's the answer to that? It's same as it was. The Jews are controlling things. The Jews are corrupting things. And so Jews get to be aside from that. And that's sort of the basis of what we see and how we see anti-Semitism coming in and again in all those sorts of ideas. It's not new, they just give it to us in a new way. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Zober. Next, we're going to hear from Steve Weidman, who's a member of Temple Sinai and an amazing photographer of our unhoused neighbors. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jane. Great. I get to follow two rabbis. That's the recent increase in hate crime seems to have a direct correlation to the popularity of social media, the founding of Black Lives Matter, and the protests after the George Floyd murder. White supremacist propaganda, which allows extremist groups to disseminate hateful messages and gain attention with little risk of public exposure, has been on the rise for several years. In 2021, there was a 27% increase in anti-Semitic content and messaging. White supremacist propaganda incidents are the use of racist and anti-Semitic flyers, stickers, banners, and posters, as well as the use of stenciled graffiti. White supremacists can maximize media and online attention while limiting the risk of individual exposure, negative media coverage, arrests, and public backlash that often accomplishes more public activities. By using propaganda to spread hate, a small number of people can have an outsized impact, giving the appearance of larger numbers and affecting entire communities. In 2020, there were 5,125 hate propaganda incidents in the United States. Nevada had 41. The majority were in the Las Vegas area. These are just the reported incidents, which are usually many more than not reported. As an ideology, white supremacy is the belief that white people are inherently superior to the people of color. It It relies on the notion that distinct races of people exist and ranks of those categorized as white at the top of the racial hierarchy. Some of the better known white supremacist groups are the American Freedom Party, Aryan Nations, Boogaloo Boys, Ku Klux Klan, and the Proud Boys. White supremacist groups target for violence Jews, Afro-Americans, Muslims, Asians, non-white immigrants, and members of the LGBTQ communities. Most white supremacists do not belong to organized hate groups, but rather participate in the white supremacist movement as unaffiliated individuals. Thus, the size of the white supremacist movement is considerably greater than the members of hate groups. Addressing just anti-Semitic incidents in the last several years in the United States, the reported, and I repeat, reported incidents are as follows in the last 4.5 years. 40 instances, 17 dead, 40 injured. I am a member of the Washoe County Sheriff's Task Force, and I asked Sheriff Balaam what were the recently reported anti-Semitic instances in Washoe County. His response is, and I quote, "Below is a summary of what our crime analyst was able to locate for Washoe County Sheriff's Office." It was just 2 instances. One was in January 26th of last year, a disorderly harassment case involving threatening emails threatening a single individual. The other one was on March 30th, 2021, graffiti placed with anti-Jewish and anti-African American language. They were unable to locate any reports in Reno or Sparks. This isn't to say there haven't been any, but they may be encoding their reports differently than we do, quote unquote. In conclusion, I think the reports of anti-Semitic incidents and incidents affecting other minority groups are vastly underreported, unless there are deaths or large numbers of the injured. Just today, the Anti-Defamation League announced the launch of an online hate index to measure anti-Semitic messages on social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for doing that work and for all the great work that you do. Next, if Addie is here, and I'm not sure she is, I know that Matt is and Malia is here. So Addie, are you here? She's teaching a class tonight. She's doing double duty. So I don't see Addie. Matt, are you still here? I know Malia is
Yes,
here.
I am.
Oh, great, Matt. So maybe you can talk a little bit. Matt Lakoff is a UNR student, and I'm not sure your role at UNR, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about anti-Semitism on campus.
Yeah, so I'm a student leader with Hillel, with Alpha Epsilon Pi, the Jewish fraternity, and we've recently started up Keshet Reno, which is a LGBT Jewish club. And I also teach at Temple Sinai as a Sunday school educator.
Matt, just if somebody's not muted, please mute yourself because we're not hearing Matt very well. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can I don't know if the audio is going to be better like this.
Oh, is it your classroom that you're in?
Oh, no, I'm not in a private space.
Okay, no worries. We got it. We got you. Thanks.
So, yeah, I grew up in Vegas. I go to UNR now, and I would say I've experienced anti-Semitism pretty consistently across the years in grade school and also at UNR. My freshman year, I actually had to move dorms because I enrolled in dorms to be LGBT friendly, like a specific LGBT friendly dorm. And one of the people in my suite started harassing me for being Jewish, doing the Nazi salute at me and things like that, which is really cool. And then, there was all sorts of swastikas on campus, just a lot of little things kind of adding up. I sort of responded to it by being more loud and outward about being Jewish. I started wearing a yarmulke and making myself identifiable. but I definitely continue to experience anti-Semitism at work, at school, from teachers, teachers who are ignorant or who genuinely just don't understand why being Jewish matters and why I have to bring it up. And then even back all the way to grade school, 6th grade, had a classmate sitting next to me ask me why I killed Jesus. And so it really started quite young for me. And the biggest problem that I've noticed is just that there's no consistent infrastructure for how to respond to that. Because I would go to, you know, admin or teachers, and they wouldn't even know if they could react or how to properly enforce any kind of respect towards Jewish people.
Okay, wow. Matt, sorry to hear you're dealing with all of that. And this is not uncommon. This is happening at colleges and high schools across the country. It's not, when I grew up, it was nothing like this. And it's really troubling. Malia, I'm not sure if Addie's here. So would you be willing to read your essay that you wrote about your experience at high school?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Malia Langer. I'm currently a senior at Damani Ranch High School in Reno. I'm going to be sharing my story about a personal experience with anti-Semitism. I've grown up very involved in the Jewish community. I'm going to be taking a gap year in Israel next year. Judaism is one of the largest parts of my identity, and anti-Semitism is something that we need to combat. So here's my story. During my sophomore year of high school, I walked into my Spanish class right after eating lunch. As I was still new to my school, I only knew one person in that class. Not knowing many people made me hate school and especially hate that class. As I walked in, my nose stuck into my phone. I sat down at my desk and put my binder down. Minutes later, when I picked my binder up, I found a swastika etched on my desk. It was small, but the way it impacted me was not. My hands became clammy and my heart dropped. I couldn't really hear what was going on around me because my head was pounding. I wasn't sure if it was real, so I asked the girl next to me if she could see it. She confirmed, and as my knee continued to bounce in nervousness for the rest of class, I decided to tell my teacher once we finished with the lecture. I walked up to her and told her about what I had just seen etched on my desk. She seemed shocked and apologized. I thought to myself, why is she apologizing? Why isn't there a protocol for something like this? Shouldn't she just get rid of the desk and replace it with an extra one? I was contemplating all of this in my head, but decided not to address it then and there. I headed home after that class and calmed myself down. It was such a small etching, but the impact it had on me was so strong. It was a symbol that represented hate against my religion, the millions of Jewish people brutally murdered during World War II. I decided that I could not stay silent about my situation and had to address it with the administration. My mom and I talked to the principal and made sure that the desk was removed. He assured us that the etching was most likely an accident and somebody might just have been doodling. I was confused why he approached it that way, but I now realize he was trying to dismiss the situation. This anti-Semitic experience has not only brought attention to my school administration about anti-Semitism, but to myself as well. I grew up in such a tight-knit Jewish community where anti-Semitism was a word I only learned the meaning of in 8th grade. I never experienced it personally as I was surrounded by people who were of the same descent and had similar beliefs. Although moving to Reno, Nevada for high school was not the easiest transition, I was able to become more exposed to the real world. Most people wouldn't be thankful for this type of experience, but I believe that it helped me realize I was no longer living in a bubble and I had to face the reality of feeling marginalized.
Malia, thank you so much for that heartbreaking story. And we're glad you're such a strong, resilient young woman and that you're taking the learning from it. So I see that Addie just joined us. And Addie, we have just a couple more minutes, but we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for coming.
I apologize for my tardiness. As a Jewish communal service worker, I'm always doing something. Today happens to be a Jewish Learning Fellowship, so apologies. I don't know what has been covered, but if we're talking about anti-Semitism as directly related to UNR, then I think we should probably start with the 2016 situation with the A Pie House. With that, there were golf balls that were hit through the windows of the Jewish fraternity's house in 2016 that had explicit comments directed towards Jews. Immediately after that, not too long after that, swastikas on campus started appearing. And then in 2019, in January, the Tree of Life incident happened. And immediately thereafter, we had issues. Oh, I'm sorry. My professional title is I'm the director of Hillel of Northern Nevada. Immediately after the Tree of Life incident, within 24 hours, there are swastikas carved on the walls outside of the dorm rooms of several of the young ladies who had Jewish last names and were not themselves Jewish. So it's not discriminatory, it just happens. In fall of 2019, we had 24 swastikas on campus, and that prompted us to start direct education with not only the campus administration, but also within reaching out to residential life, reaching out directly to not only the housing, but also the administration, and in broader context to the incoming students. We discovered that almost all of our early on swastikas happened in the first part of the fall semester. So we came to believe that perhaps this had something to do with new freshmen who had never interacted with others. And once we started actually targeting the RAs in the dorms and the mentors, we discovered that pretty quickly all the problems with the swastikas on campus went away, which says it was dominantly an issue of education. That doesn't mean that the anti-Semitism on campus is gone. It means that the overt anti-Semitism on campus is now under control through educational efforts, but that does not eliminate passive anti-Semitism on campus as well.
Addie, thank you so much for that. And it's just one piece of bad news after another, but we're going to hear very soon on how to be an ally and some things that you can do. But first, and this is something that we can all do too, we're joined tonight by Molly Rose Lewis, who is the regional representative for Senator Jackie Rosen. And Molly, please tell us what's happening on the federal level, and thanks for being here.
Hi there. Thanks so much for inviting me. And well, I'm the backup for Senator Rosen. That is my job as a regional representative here in the Reno office. I also see that someone from Senator Cortez Masto's office is here. So thanks for coming. As most of you probably know who are on this call, but I'll just mention this, that Senator Rosen is only the third Jewish woman senator in the US Senate, which is pretty exciting that we have her. She is the first former synagogue president, which is interesting as well. And one of the, what I want to just mention in my short time today is what some of the things that she has been working to do in the Senate and on a federal level. One of the main things, which I think is pretty exciting, is that she started the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Antisemitism, which previously did not exist in the Senate. And some of the things that task force is working on include trying to ensure the physical security of Jewish institutions. That's, for example, with using the Department of Homeland Security's nonprofit security grant program. Some of you who are involved in synagogues and such probably know about what we're talking about there. Things like, she's also, with that task force is also working on combating domestic violent extremism and to advance accurate Holocaust education, counter Holocaust denial, which we know is happening at a pretty scary prevalent rate, especially as folks who actually survived the Holocaust are starting to leave us. Some of the other things that she's working on is improving the anti-Semitic hate crime data collection, holding people accountable for that online anti-Semitic hate speech. I know this is something that, for example, the ADL is doing, like was mentioned before. And one of the other things that's important that Senator Rosen has worked on with the Anti-Semitism Task Force is to make it so we actually have that special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism within the United States government, and raising that person up to the level of ambassador. So that was actually passed last year to raise that envoy up to the level of ambassador. And we're currently waiting for the nominee, Deborah Lipstadt, to actually be confirmed. Just today, that was going to potentially happen, but has now been pushed off again due to one senator who she called racist because he is. Anyway, that is sort of the very short version of what's happening with Deborah Lipstadt, but that's really important. Of course, we all know that it's important to get that passed. I think everyone here agrees, and I know that Jane at one point asked me to talk about that a little. So that's the version I have for today. Something just to mention before I mention a couple of other things that the senator has been working on is in terms of activism on that level. The senator, just Senator Rosen, of course, is absolutely behind her. She's actually the one who introduced Deborah Lipstadt for her nomination. So it's not necessary to contact her and tell her to support her. So I know we all wish we could do more advocacy. That's not necessary. It's also not helpful to contact other senators from other states. I don't know if everyone, so this is just my former organizer and me also speaking and now working in a Senate's office, but in general, just a word to the wise, if you contact someone, a senator from another state, they will ignore you, delete it. It's not worth it. However, if you have friends in other states, especially with Republican senators, you can certainly ask them to contact their senators and ask them to please push forward the confirmation. So that is my little mini brief on that. I just want to, in the couple more minutes that I have, I want to mention a couple of other things that the senator has been doing while she's been in the Senate. A lot of them are things like resolutions that she's passed condemning the surge in anti-Semitism, condemning the attack in Colleyville, Texas recently, not urging the president to work to get the ambassador nominated, moved through, confirmed, etc. One of the other things that's kind of great is that this was actually signed into law already. Her bipartisan Never Again Education Act, which actually helps get grants for Holocaust education programs in schools. And I think I have a whole list of things. I won't list them all. She does, of course, as one of the few Jewish senators, does a lot on this. But I will put my email address in the messages in the chat box if you want to directly reach out to me. You can also go to, I think I have this, yes, my Vanna White messaging here, rosen.senate.gov to find out more about the anti-Semitism work she does. But you're welcome to contact me directly. One of the things that I do as the senator's representative is work on Jewish community issues. And I will just say that that is an interesting part we talk about. And this is probably something a lot of us know on this call, but it's an ethnicity as well as a religion. I consider myself Jewish ethnically, but I'm not a practicing Jew in my religious sense. So there we go. Oh, I'm sorry, I just missed some of the things in the chat, but yes, we can talk more about that later, and there will be a Q&A after all the presentations. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Molly Rose, really appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Emeritus Professor Deborah Achtenberg, and who's retired now and doing tremendous work. So Deborah's going to talk about how to be an ally. You're on, Deborah. And I think you're unmuted, so you're ready to go.
Is my screen sharing?
It is.
Thank you very much, Jane. This is a wonderful event. And I'm going to talk about 7 things you can do about anti-Semitism. Number 1, recognize, call out, and organize against anti-Semitism on the right. Anti-Semitism is central to far-right movements. People on the far right see Jews as the ones pulling the strings or behind the scenes. Jews are seen as responsible for the great replacement of whites by people of color. To defeat the right, anti-Semitism must be defeated as well. Number two, study right-wing anti-Semitism as well as its relation to racism. Some excellent resources include Skin in the Game by Eric Ward and Anti-Semitism in Our Midst, Past and Present, an orientation film from the University of California, Berkeley. Number three, call out and stop anti-Semitism on the left. At Occupy in New York City, a sign said, Google Jewish bankers. At Reno Occupy, one participant told a Jews in the ovens joke. These are two of many examples of recent left anti-Semitism. Number four, study left anti-Semitism. If you think left anti-Semitism does not exist or is a fiction created by conservative critics, listen to this recording of important leftists such as Shane Burley, a Portland anti-fascist activist and theorist, discussing and debating different aspects of anti-Semitism on the left. It's called Leftists on Left-Wing Anti-Semitism from the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. Number five, don't participate in good Jew, bad Jew thinking. For many liberals, Jews are great because they're liberals. But if they wear funny clothes, ask to reschedule meetings for their holidays or for time off for them, or pray in an ancient language, they are called primitive, pushy, superstitious, clannish, or much worse. Jews, like all people, come in different varieties, religious and secular, liberal and conservative, Israel-centered and diaspora-centered, Reform and Orthodox. For too much of our history, we have been told that we are okay as long as we are, well, just like you. Number six, don't assume that Jews are white. Jews are varied. Some are white, some brown, some black. They come from the US, Europe, Africa, Latin America, and more. Around 17% of Jews in the US are non-white. The majority of Jews in Israel are what in the US would be called people of color. And the majority of Jews in the country with the third largest Jewish population, France, are from North Africa. In addition, while US liberals tend to think of Jews as white supremacists often think of Jews as non-white. As a result, even white Jews are not white in exactly the same way as other white people. Number seven, be cognizant of how vulnerable Jews feel right now. Every day, we hear people on the far right shouting against Soros and Zuckerberg. We see references to Jewish overlords and Jewish bankers, and we hear about violent attacks on Jews, both in the US and around the world. Add to that the fact that most of us have relatives who were murdered by the Nazis in Europe or were expelled from their countries in North Africa in mid-20th century, and we are definitely feeling vulnerable. We sometimes wonder why you are not more concerned for us, especially since we have been so active in liberal and left movements. If we are going to defeat the growing far right in the US, we must all pull together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And we are going to post some of the points that Deborah made along with some of the links that she mentioned in her talk. And I see Jolie just came in, but let's do a couple Q&A, and then Jolie Brislin from the Anti-Defamation League will close us out. So I'm looking at some questions. Will the recording be made available? Yes, it will. We'll get that sent to you, so thank you. The next question is, anti-Semitism is prevalent in other countries as it is in the United States. And I'll start that out, but I'd love some of the other panelists to add in their knowledge. In fact, in most other countries, it's probably worse. In England and France, especially, It's quite virulent right now. So maybe one of the other panelists can add some more details to that. And just feel free to pop in one of our other panelists here. And
Okay.
Jolie, you're welcome to as well.
We know how virulent anti-Semitism is in France, but I think the US is getting pretty close to the same level.
Uh-huh. And in England, it was quite bad and has been quite bad for a long, long time. And many Jews are starting to emigrate out of Europe to Israel or to the United States or other places that might feel safe. But those safe places are disappearing. One of our rabbis or Jolie, does anybody?
Yeah, I can offer a little bit as Jolie's getting set up. The Anti-Defamation League does have on their website has a kind of a survey about this that looks at both on a country level and on a kind of a continent-wide level, looking at the percentage of people who harbor anti-Jewish beliefs. And the number for the United States is about 19%. Oceania is the lowest at, I think, 14%. And the North Africa and the Middle East is the highest at 74%, with the rest being in the 20s or 30s. And of course, there's going to be some variation between the countries, but that gives you just kind of a broad survey regionally.
Any of the other panelists want to chime in there? Okay. There was a statement made, not a question. I saw a survey of European populations. Would you accept Jews as fellow citizens? Ukraine came in the best, only 5% negative. There are still a fair few Ukrainians, Jewish Ukrainians, and many of us have Ukrainian ancestors as well. The worst was Greece, 16% negative, the rest in between. Somebody asked a question to Molly, who's the senator holding up the ambassador's confirmation? And that would be Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. So if you have any friends in Wisconsin, tell them to get on the phone and please call Senator Johnson. There's a question for you, Professor Achtenberg. Do you have any advice specifically on how to call it out? And we'll start with you and see if anybody else has. And this is for any kind of racism. This is the first of many panels about that. But Deborah, any advice there?
Well, I think call it out in your own voice, however you feel is the best way to call it out, but don't ignore it. If you can recognize it, that's the first step, and then call it out in the sensitive way you would call it out, given your own voice.
Yeah, this is the $1 million question. How do you stay friends, bring up these tricky questions, these difficult topics, but it is very important to call it out. And it might be something that just even as simple as, ouch, wow, that really hurt what you said. And help me understand what your thinking is behind that. But we can provide some more resources on our website, maybe even offer some classes down the road of how do you become a good ally to anybody who's facing discrimination. Let's see, here in Northern Nevada, is anti-Semitism committed most often anonymously, like what happened at UNR? I'm not sure I would know the answer to that. Anybody on our panel, Rabbi Benjamin or Jolie, Deborah, you might know. Are those acts of anti-Semitism anonymous, or are people pretty blatant?
I haven't been in Northern Nevada long enough to know.
Okay. Deborah, when those terrible flyers went up at Temple Emanu-El and in the boxes, were those done in the dark of night, typically?
There have been a lot of flyers that contain really terrible anti-Semitic content in Reno, and they're posted kind of secretively, but they do identify the organizations that they come from. We've had flyers from Daily Stormer, we've had flyers from the American Identity Movement, and a number of others.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, based upon what we're
Oh, you just went on mute, Jolie.
really what we're seeing too is the Goyim Defense League is also in the middle of this flyering. propaganda materials. And what they're doing now is they're actually monetizing hate. So they have a website and they tell everybody, if you will give $100 in merchandise credit to our website, if you print out this flyer and you distribute it in your community. So it's really the first time we've seen hate be monetized like this.
Wow.
And that's a Goyim Defense League and Folk Front and a couple other organizations, but specifically Goyim Defense League. And that's what we've seen on the universities as well.
Mara, you had your hand up a second ago, Mara Langer.
So I'm Mara Langer. I'm from Jewish Nevada. I'm the Northern Nevada Outreach and Engagement Coordinator. And I just wanted to say thank you for pulling this together. But I also wanted to address the question of if people identify themselves. And I think it depends. You know, some people are very proud of the way that they feel and they voice who they are in their opinions. And other people kind of join the bandwagon and just want to be, you know, part of the disturbance, I'll call it, or, you know, the messaging, but aren't strong enough to actually voice who they are, or they might be part of a group like Jolie was just saying. So I don't think there's one answer to that. I think it really just depends on the situation and who's committing the anti-Semitic act.
Thank you. Thank you. Rabbi Zober.
Yeah, I want to build a little bit on what everyone is saying about this, and certainly the fact that some people are very can be and feel comfortable enough being very open about expressing very, very bigoted and anti-Semitic views and taking these actions is alarming in of itself. And there are other people who are still a little more private with their bigotry, but those tend to be the large things, the things that we, you know, carving a swastika somewhere is unequivocally an anti-Semitic act. But the reality is that a lot of anti-Semitism is much more subtle and oftentimes almost unintentionally problematic. When someone refers to someone as a Pharisee, I mean, the Pharisees were Jews. They were, some people, in some ways, they were the kind of the forerunners to the rabbis. And so to use that as a slur is to say, you know, you are bad in this way, and connect them with Jews, or the fact that there are still churches that put on passion plays, and they don't go about it and think, oh, I'm doing this. This is anti-Semitic. But it is, and it does perpetuate some of these ideas and these problematic things. So it's not always so obvious. And what can, as was mentioned, we tend to have influence in our own circles and spaces. And so while we should all be decrying large-scale bigotry in whatever form it takes against whoever it is, when we're closer to home, if we see these things or hear these things, we have the relationships where we can speak out. If someone says Jewed him down or Jewed them down, that's playing on the notion of Jews as greedy. And many people have never given any thought to the origin of that phrase, but it comes from anti-Semitism. And when someone close to us says it, we are in a position to say, hey, I don't know if you've ever thought about what you just said, but here's what's going on. And we can do that on a personal, relational level, and kind of build from there, because it's not just big things.
Thanks, Rabbi Zober. I want to give the last couple minutes here to Jolie, who's joining us from Las Vegas. One of our few people from down south.
Thank you. I'm so happy that I'm able to be here and be a part of even bringing this a little bit to the community. So, you know, tonight you've heard from many wonderful speakers in hopes of understanding the full picture of how and why anti-Semitism manifests in our community, our country, and really around the world. And ADL is a leading organization fighting hatred, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. And we believe the best antidote against the virus of hate is education. And each of you have taken a really powerful step tonight by being here and being part of this conversation. And so I really do applaud you. So and a few minutes ago, we were talking about what are some steps that we can take? What are some action steps that we can all leave here with to be better equipped to fight hate in Nevada? And so first, I want to acknowledge that dismantling anti-Semitism is not a simple process. There needs to be a multi-step planned approach, action step, and that includes education, advocacy, and allyship. And everyone really has a duty to speak out, share facts, and show strength. And so some immediate steps that we can all take is one, we've heard this quite a bit this evening, but speak up. It might sound simple, but if you witness an anti-Semitic incident, choose at that moment to be an ally. Choose at that moment to call it out. And oftentimes when you do that, it actually has a ripple effect that someone who might not understand that the words that they're saying are so hurtful, now think about the next time they say something, racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted towards any group a little bit differently. I actually spoke today to a school here in Las Vegas. And so often when I speak with community members and students who have witnessed anti-Semitic incidents or speech, everyone pretty much kind of says the same thing, that I didn't speak out because I didn't know what to say. So I encourage you to find a friend and practice how you would respond if you were confronted with anti-Semitism. So you're not having to think of these responses off the cuff. If you're a teacher, find a way to include anti-Semitism into your lesson plans. And, a lot of this information is on ADL's website. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, have meaningful conversations with young people in your family, because so often the best education comes from around the kitchen table. And ADL has table talks ready to go that you can look up to start these conversations with your kids and your grandkids. So you don't have to try to come up with how do you start in such a hard conversation around this. And so if you go to adl.org, you can pull those table talk conversations. And continue to educate yourself. We're all doing that this evening, whether this is one of your first touches to anti-Semitism or you're a scholar in it. There's always more to learn. There's new hate symbols and new groups that are continuously popping up, and being able to educate and being able to understand what is anti-Semitism, and equally important, what is not anti-Semitism, right? We want to be very deliberate when we call out and call something anti-Semitic. And advocate, right? I'm so happy to see Molly, and we have Senator Rosen and Senator Masto representatives on this call, and we're very lucky in the state of Nevada. But advocate, reach out to our federal and local elected officials, let them know that addressing anti-Semitism in our state and our country should be a top priority for them. We are lucky again that we have our senators, but we need to confirm Deborah Lipstadt as the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. This ambassadorship, I don't know if everybody knows, but is really critical in urging foreign governments to protect their Jewish communities, establishing national coordinators to address anti-Semitism, and developing and implementing policies to combat anti-Semitism and hate. So it's a very important position. It's actually being moved from envoy to ambassador to really help, emphasize how important having this position is in our government. And then the last step I will leave you with is report. Nevada is not immune to this type of bigotry. Last year, we had over 24 anti-Semitic incidents of vandalism, harassment, and violence that were reported to ADL Nevada. And if you see an experience of anti-Semitism, please report the incident to adl.org. Call our office. We are here to help. If you feel like you're in immediate danger, please reach out to law enforcement and 911. But really, we need to know when incidents are taking place, whether it be a swastika, whether it be harassment, because we know that data drives policy and change. And so the information that's provided to us when an incident is reported is what allows us to work closely with law enforcement, community stakeholders, government, and policymakers to really effectively fight anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry and hate. And without informed and supportive citizens reporting these incidents, we're never really able to get the full picture of anti-Semitism in our state. So very, very important. Please report that to adl.org. And so lastly, if you're experiencing anti-Semitism, you're probably not that person's only victim, right? Without actions, those with these bad intentions will continue to be emboldened by society's silence, and which ultimately could really graduate to a more extreme level. We've seen this around the country, whether it be Pittsburgh or Colleyville, and these extreme levels of speech and violence, and who knows what will happen the next time. So, we need to continue having these conversations. And it truly amazes me the difference that one person can make. So continue to speak up and help us eradicate hate in the Silver State.
Thank you so much, Jolie. Somebody asked what Jolie's title was. She's the Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League in Nevada. So thank you for your great work, Jolie. It's never ending and tough. We've gone a little bit over. Thanks to everybody for staying. We will stay on for those who want to continue the conversation for another 10 minutes or so. If you have more questions, I think there are a few more questions in the chat that I will take a look at. But again, we so appreciate, especially for our non-Jewish friends who are here tonight to learn. It brings tears to my eyes that you're here. We need you. When there's a terrible incident, we need you to call us and check in on how we're doing, because every incident affects us. The person beat up on LA, the Colville, we feel it in our guts, just as anybody would feel it if their religion or ethnicity was being attacked. So we need to stand together strong. Northern Nevada Marches Forward will be hosting these forums every month. Next month, we're going to be talking about the climate. The month after that, violence against women. It'll always be the second Tuesday of the month. The next one's April 12th. So again, we are so grateful for you being here. If you can donate, we can pay tech people and figure this out. Wes is pretty much volunteering his time, and we'd love to pay him and just get a little bit fancier. This is our first seminar. So again, thank you so much. We're officially over, but we will stay on till about 7:15 if anybody has a question, and I'll take a look at what's in the chat, but we can get a little more informal here, and feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. So thank you to all of our speakers who put a lot of time, our volunteers. Jackie, thank you, Wes. Couldn't do it without all of you. So really appreciate everybody's effort here. So I'll go back to what's in the, clap, yay, we did it. Addie's professional title, I think, is the Hillel Northern, who knows Addie's title?
She's the Northern Nevada Director for Hillel.
And you can find her, and we'll put some of these names up. Somebody says, I'm a senior at UNR. I had no knowledge of the issues on campus. How many instances have there been? So if you are still here, we'll get you in touch with Addie, because she definitely knows that at her fingertips. And it says, can you add the reporting information to the chat so we can see your website resources? I believe somebody did put ADL information in there, Anti-Defamation League, is that right? UNR campus, if you're a student on campus, they have their own hate reporting. And we always encourage you to start with the police. If something's happened or on campus or at work, and then it's also very helpful to report it to ADL, because they do incredible tracking here and abroad. So anybody else has a question, feel free to just chime in or raise your hand. We can be pretty informal here. Sorry that we're bumming you out, you guys, but this is our lives. We just need to let folks know what's going on. And we're so grateful you're here. Any closing words from our panelists or Jackie?
I'll just jump in really quickly. Thank you so much. Jane has, I don't know how many of you know this, but Jane has been putting in hours and hours to make this happen. So it's just been a great turnout. Thank you all for being here. just a couple things. I know Mara put some information about Deborah Lipstadt, who we've mentioned several times, and she, if you want to look her up, she has a really interesting history as a historian, a professor working on Holocaust denial, et cetera, and anti-Semitism work. So she's a really great person to be in this position. And I also, just one really quick thing, I forgot to mention, the senator also started in the interest of working together with across barriers and groups. The senators also started a Senate Black Jewish caucus, which we are starting and trying to work on getting more in-state work on as well. Some of you on this call are involved in that. If you're not and are interested in being involved in that, please let me know. And I did put my my contact information in the chat.
Thank you so much, Molly Rose. Wendy Bozak, please, I don't know if you want to come on camera or not.
I just put a question in the chat. I said that the Z that Russia is using has been likened to the swastika. And I just wondered if we're going to be seeing that and if that should be reported.
Aha. I am not aware of that. Jolie, might you know?
So I'm actually not aware of that either, but if you do start to see this, then yes, I would say ADL would be a good place to report that to, maybe not law enforcement per se, because if we start to see this happening in multiple places, we definitely need to, start to examine this a little bit more. But, we're constantly doing work around Ukraine right now and the anti-Semitism that we're seeing kind of funneled in there from Russia. So, I urge you every day to look at ADL's website because we're putting out new briefings. And if you sign up for our newsletter for Nevada, we constantly are sending these out as well.
Thanks.
A Russian gymnast just used the Z on their uniform when they were standing on the podium next to a Ukrainian gymnast. So it's starting to be used, unfortunately.
Yikes. And on the ADL website, they actually have, and probably you could just Google it. There's so many hate crimes. It's unbelievable. We can't keep up with them, but you can take a look at what those are. And there's hand signals and different things to be aware of. So any other questions, final comments? I think that might be it. Steve or Jackie, can we gather all these items in the chat and we can add them to whatever we might send out as a follow-up, because there were some great resources here. So if you didn't catch them all, we will do that for all of you. Thank you, Jackie. All right. Well, again, a final thanks to our speakers, to everybody for being here and just being part of this amazing Reno community. Will the recording be emailed? Jackie, question for you. I think she's here. I believe so. We need to discuss how to do it, but we will stay in touch with you. It might be a link on our website, but we're inventing this as we go. This was the first of our forums, and we'll get it tighter as we go. But again, I think we'll just say goodnight.
Thanks so much, Jane, for your efforts. Believe me. Thank you.
Yes, I want to say that too. Thank you so much, Jane, for doing this.
You're welcome. It was.
I echo. Thank you, Jane.
You're very welcome. I honor my parents who did a lot of this work. So thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you so much, Jane. This was amazing.
Thank you, Adrian.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.